Hi, everybody. Welcome to our next section of reading in the book of Genesis, and I hope that you are enjoying us going through together the very first book of the Bible. And I'm trusting, as you've been following along now in the last few weeks, that you understand that we're just doing little portions of each chapter, and hoping that you are going to read the entire chapter on your own. And we're just kind of highlighting different things that happen in these chapters. We notice, of course, when we get further along in the book of Genesis, that Abraham takes center stage, and then Abraham's family does. This is, of course, according to the plan of God, that through Abraham he would bless the world, which we're going to look at tonight. And that was through the family of Israel, which eventually Jesus came from. But we notice that there's a different type of teaching in the book of Genesis that focuses more on the stories of people's lives, how they encountered God, how they experienced God, how they moved in faith, and sometimes how they moved with lack of faith. And so that's kind of what we're looking at when we start to look at the story of Abraham and the call of God to this great forefather of our faith. And so we're going to be in Genesis 12, 13, and 14. We're going to have three different readings, one from each chapter, and we'll talk a little bit about the rest of the chapters there. Abraham's failure to have faith or to completely trust God, and how he kind of hides the truth about his wife and so on. But we're going to begin, of course, with the call. Remember, last week we left off in chapter 11. You had the Tower of Babel, where humankind was again devising evil or human pride, and God scattered the people, and they had different languages. And Abraham's father, remember, had the inclination to go to the land of Canaan, but he stopped at Haran. And so for whatever reason, we don't know why his father Terah had the inclination to go to Canaan, but he did in chapter 11, but he just didn't go all the way. Faith, of course, answers the call of God and goes where God is calling them to go. And so that's where we pick up the great story of chapter 12. In a world where very few people believed in the one God, Abraham receives a call. And so let's begin chapter 12, verses 1 through 5. It says, "Now the Lord said to Abram," remember his name's not Abraham yet, "the Lord said to Abram, go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you, and I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you I will curse, and in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed." So Abraham went as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he departed from Haran, and Abram took Sarai his wife, and Lot his brother's son, and all their possessions that they had gathered, and the people that they had acquired in Haran, and they set out to go to the land of Canaan. When they came to the land of Canaan, Abram passed through the land to the place at Shechem, to the oak of Moreh, and at that time the Canaanites were in the land. So you've got the beginning there of Abram going to build altars to God in the promised land. But you notice here that God comes to Abraham with a specific call, but also a scary call, that he was to leave everything that was familiar with him, right? He was to leave his country, leave his kindred, leave his father, and come to the land that God would show them. God doesn't really tell Abram at this point what the land is, but he's going to show Abram the land. But then it comes with a great promise. Number one, God was going to make Abram a great nation. Now, Abram has no children yet, and he's 75 years old. But God gives him this promise that from Abraham would come a great nation. But not only would Abram be the father of a great nation, God was going to bless him, make his name great, so that he himself was a blessing. And he uses the word bless or blessing, or a form of it, 5 different times in these short verses. Those who bless Abraham will be blessed, and those who dishonor Abraham will be cursed. But then he says, it's not just Abraham's family that would be blessed, but in Abraham, all the families of the earth will be blessed. So remember, in the Tower of Babel incident, you have the entire earth being scattered. There's this kind of curse, right? In the Garden of Eden, when Adam and Eve fall, there's a curse on mankind. when Noah is told to build the ark, the earth is making God regret that he made humankind. But now we realize that none of it has been lost as far as God's love for the world. And so now he has a plan that somehow through Abraham, all people will be blessed. And so this is the promise that the entire Old Testament looks forward to. In Genesis chapter 3, after the fall, remember, he said the seed of the woman was going to crush the head of Satan or the serpent. That was one part of the promise. And now, through Abraham, all people of the earth will be blessed. God has not forgotten his deep love for humankind. Well, something happens, interestingly, that Abram gets to the land of Canaan. He builds an altar to God in the land of Canaan. And then all of a sudden, as soon as there's some trouble, he leaves the land of Canaan, goes down to Egypt the rest of chapter 12. And he all of a sudden starts to think with himself. And this is part of the problem that our faith encounters, is when we start thinking we have to live by our own rationalization rather than trying to live by faith, right? That we have to try to control things. Abraham starts to realize, Abram at the time, my wife's beautiful, they're going to kill me for her, and so I'm going to have her say that she's my sister instead. And there's a little bit of truth to it, is that they're related. And so therefore he kind of maybe justifies with himself that he's not really lying, but he truly is. And Pharaoh gets angry at Abram for this lie. But think about how far Abram's willing to go in his lack of faith at this point. He's willing to go very far in his faith, but he's also willing to go very far in his lack of faith. He's gotten to the point that he allows himself to give his wife to someone else. So we go to chapter 13. He gets out of that incident. God saves him from that incident. And Abraham and Lot are growing in their wealth and their possessions. And they're getting to the point that Lot's people and Abram's people are quarreling over the shared space, right? That there's this idea that this space there's not enough space for the two of us. And so there's this quarreling together. And we see something in Abraham when we pick up in chapter 13 and verse 8. Then Abram said to Lot, let there be no strife between you and me, between your herdsmen and my herdsmen, for we are kinsmen, we are brethren. Is not the whole land before you? Separate yourself from me. If you take the left hand, then I will go to the right. If you take the right hand, then I will go to the left. And Lot lifted up his eyes and saw that the Jordan Valley was well watered everywhere, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt, in the direction of Zoar. This was before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. So Lot chose for himself all the Jordan Valley, and Lot journeyed east, thus they separated from each other. Abram settled in the land of Canaan, while Lot settled among the cities of the valley, and moved his tent as far as Sodom. Now the men of Sodom were wicked, great sinners against the Lord. The Lord said to Abram after Lot had separated from him, lift up your eyes and look from the place where you are, northward and southward, and eastward and westward. For all the land you see I will give to you, and to your offspring forever. So there's a number of things that we want to notice. First of all, back in the original call, God had said to Abram that he was to leave his kindred and his father's house, and yet he still kept Lot with him. Now, there may be a familial responsibility here. If Lot, as his nephew, if Lot's father had died, maybe Abraham took responsibility for Lot and so brought Lot with him. But this separation has to happen. And notice the grace of Abram. When he says, first of all, to Lot, let there be no strife between us, because we are family. Unlike Cain and Abel, right? Unlike Cain's view of Abel, because pretty sure Abel would have been of the same mind as Abram. Let there be no strife between us. And Abram gets to the point that he basically says to Lot, you choose where you want, and I'll go where you don't want. And he gives Lot free choice. And this is a wonderful example from Abram. That even though he knows he's been promised things from God, there's something about this. Let others consider others better than yourselves. The Apostle Paul said in Philippians chapter 2. Love does not seek its own way, Paul said in 1 Corinthians 13. And we see that in Abram here. Lot, of course, we know, chooses the well-watered area. He chooses what's pleasing to the eye, kind of like Eve saw the fruit as pleasing to her eye. And, of course, he goes to Sodom, and the writer is already setting up for us the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, reminding us that it's not yet destroyed, so we know it's going to happen, but also that the people of Sodom are very wicked against God. When this happens, you'll notice that once Abram and Lot separate, God renews his promise. Right where you are, look north, look south, look east, look west. And all the land you see, I will give to you and to your offspring forever. And so this is the beginning of the promise of the land of Israel, right? The land of Canaan. So we get to chapter 14, and we notice that even though Abram and Lot have separated, and even though there was some striving between them and Abraham didn't want it to happen, Abram still cares for Lot. And Lot is among the people who get taken over in this battle of these kings. And Lot is taken captive. And Abram hears about this. And Abram has become a person of means. And so he takes some warriors with him. And he takes over 300 of them. And they go and they rescue Lot. And not only do they rescue Lot, they rescue all sorts of things and possessions and people and all these different things, and they bring them back. And so Abram wins a great victory that day. And so we pick it up in chapter 14 that he meets this mysterious individual, beginning in verse 17. After his return from the defeat of Chedorlaomer and the kings who were with him, the king of Sodom went out to meet him, being Abram, at the valley of Shaveh, that is, the king's valley. And Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. He was priest of the God Most High, and he blessed him and said, Blessed be Abram, by God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth, and blessed be God Most High, who's delivered your enemies into your hand. So you have Melchizedek, this mysterious person, this king of Salem, this priest of God Most High. And he blesses Abraham and blesses God. And Abram gave him 1/10 of everything. This is the first mention ever of a tithe. And the king of Sodom said to Abram, this is not Melchizedek now, this is the king of Sodom, give me the persons, but take the goods for yourself. And so the king of Sodom says, I want the people of mine, but you can take everything that's good for yourself. And so we notice, first of all, that the king of Sodom isn't entirely wicked, right? This is an important thing here. They're not entirely wicked. He's saying to Abram, you can take what belongs, you can take the possessions. But Abram said to the king of Sodom, I have lifted my hand to the Lord, God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth. And he's setting up something here. We want you to notice that everything in the earth and everything above belongs to God. Everything. And Abram says, I've lifted my hand to him. And I promised that I would not take a thread or a sandal strap or anything that is yours, lest you should say, I have made Abram rich. I want the world to know that it's because of God's blessings. I will take nothing but what the young men have eaten and the share of the men who went with me. Let Aner, Eshcol, and Mamre take their share. And you have Abraham here, who's a great example again. He fails, but he's also a person of great faith, but he's a great example that he will not be tempted by greed. He will not be tempted by riches. As easy as it would have been to grab hold of this, like Eve and Adam grabbing hold of the forbidden fruit, as easy as it would have been to grab hold of it, to maybe justify breaking his vow, he says, no. I don't want anyone to be able to say they made Abram rich, only God. We're going to continue with this great story of faith. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me at westsidewindsorcoc@gmail.com, or call me, 519-995-4189. God bless everyone.